Alex, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.
Sorry, I cannot hear anything anymore. I just see your lips moving.
Hi, Alex. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, thanks.
Ready to start? Okay, I've got permission now. Okay, welcome here. This is our quarterly committee meeting. It's the committee we all are glad to be here. It's going to take it pretty seriously, and thank you all the committee members. This being here, we're called to order. That's me. And adoption of the agenda. I need a mover and seconder for that. Seconded by. Good. Seconded. Thank you. Okay, all in favor? Carrie. And just before we get into our presentation, I thought we'd introduce ourselves again. There's a lot of new people here, committee members, but we don't see each other very often, so we don't always know our names. And my apologies, sometimes I have to work on that as well. So I'm Simon, so I'm chairing the committee and on council. And we also have Patricia Dreesen as my alternate if I can't make it, or somebody won a lottery, big lottery, I don't want to hear anything. So it's good. Okay, so let's work around here. You want to maybe our committee members first, please? Sure. You can mention it one sentence while you're here or whatever, and that would be great too.
My name's Annette Boros. I've lived in Abbotsford my whole life, and I'm currently the manager of employment services for the province under Community Living British Columbia, and I've worked in the field of serving people with disabilities towards employment pretty much my whole career, except for when I was managing the ABC restaurant and the Earl's restaurant. That was my first foray into my career. I also serve for the national government as well on the Accessibility Act, and I'm the president of the World Association for Supported Employment. So have my tentacles out, but this is important. This grassroots Abbotsford is my thing.
My name is Jessica Roblin. I recently actually moved to Abbotsford, but I've always lived in the Lower Mainland. And I think when I first saw in the newspaper that they were looking for people, I don't know if I can think of anyone in my life who it doesn't impact accessibility and equity. My dad had a spinal cord injury when I was 10. And so watching his struggles through all of that, and my mom has had a stroke. I've had my own learning disabilities and everything. So pretty much everyone in my life has found barriers to accessibility. So I thought it was a good chance to actually have some kind of impact on it.
Yeah, great to have you. Great.
I'm Amy D'Angelo. I'm the communications manager for the Chilliwack School District, but I live here in Abbotsford. And I'm also the vice chair of the Reach Gallery Museum. When I was the parent to a young child, she was a toddler who was toilet training. I started, noticing accessibility barriers and haven't stopped naming them since. And I've always had the privilege of working for organizations that are really focused on accessibility. So I'm here in the capacity as a community member. And I'm really interested in how communications and accessibility fit together.
Great, perfect for this committee. Yeah.
Do you want to go to online or to me?
Yeah, online, yeah, go. Can you hear me now? Okay. Good. Full volume.
Yes.
Go for it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Thompson. I'm an occupational therapist, and I started 16 years ago a charity in the Fraser Valley so that we could offer accessibility to nature to people of all ages and all abilities. I am myself neurodiverse, and I also live with different disabilities, sometimes invisible. And just have worked in the school districts consulting for the last 20 years, and just very passionate about what we offer to families and how we can remove barriers in community for everyone to feel included and integrated. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Good, welcome. And
Nice to meet you. My name's Gina Johnson. I'm a registered social worker. I started a private practice 3 months ago. I'm halfway through a Master of Education program, and I have disabilities and kids with disabilities, and I'm homeschooling my youngest who has multiple disabilities. So I'm happy to be here from my own experience and to help out clients in the field of social work. Thank you.
good, good.
I'm Lisa Lowe. I'm here as a citizen and myself, but I'm also with the MSA Society for Community Living, supporting people with developmental disabilities. And accessibility has always been a passion of mine my whole life. So I'm always looking.
You've all come to the right place. This is the epicenter right here. And the next, let's introduce staff too. So we'll start here. And just introduce yourself. Sure. The titles are interesting. They'd like to know what you do.
My name is Brady Rugby. So, it works, parks, roads, and utilities. Anything to do with maintenance and renewal of existing assets is within my.
Hi, I'm Todd Swerson. I'm the general manager of Parks, Recreation, and Culture. I work very closely with Bernie when it comes to delivering services. He's kind of the implementation arm of Parks, and we're the planning arm of Parks, Recreation, and Culture. He's the implementation arm of recreation centers, for example, and we're kind of the planning programming side of things. So we work closely on understanding cultural services as we deliver service organization. Yeah, relationships and partnerships with. So try to be in the background doing a lot of planning and support.
Good afternoon. My name is Nathan Koenig. I'm the general manager of engineering and utilities. That includes utilities side, water, sewer, drainage, the transportation side, roads, transit. We take care of the planning and the construction side of settlements, and then operations, they operate.
Hi, I'm Ryan Bear. I'm a community planner working on long-range policy planning, and excited to show you what we're up to with the OCP, so I'll maybe save it for then.
I'm Mitch Coombe, and I'm also a senior community planner, but I also work in parks as well, so a bit of a double agent, and I'm going to be talking about the lake tonight.
Hi, I'm Danielle Pope. I think I probably have maybe the longest title. I'm the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture, Planning and Business Services. So I deal with park planning and development, special events, booking and allocating places and spaces in the community, and policies. So nice to meet everyone.
Hi, I'm Heather Power. I'm the Director of Community Planning. So working, Brian's on my team, and we work on the official community plan and zoning bylaw and those kinds of long-range planning policies.
I'm Katie Maxwell, Legislative Services Advisor. I'm together with planning committees and council meetings. Tammy Catola, and I am the assistant city clerk, and I handle council committee meetings, just like Katie said. And so, yeah, we're excited that we're here today. Let us know if you need anything.
Well, as a committee, if you feel pretty flattered, we have big guns here today. So we'll be getting some reports on that. Appreciate that. Appreciate all you folks being here. It's great. Okay, just before I begin, I want to just thank all the effort that went into the consultation. Some of you looked at that from a distance, some of you were involved with that. We did a pretty good consultation the last year or so on accessibility. We went to schools and all kinds of displays up. A lot of people came out, so then staff did quite a good report to council on it. So we're making progress here. Sometimes it's baby steps. We'd like to do more. I know we look around and some things that we see that might improve, but we'll be a part of the solution here. So that's a good thing. So the next item is the adoption of minutes. I believe, I didn't do that yet, did I? Yeah. Motion to adopt the minutes from the previous meeting. All in favor? Good. Okay, Karen. Now, the main thing that we're doing today is the middle lane reports. That's been just, everybody has that, committee members got that, so you had a chance to look at it. So I'm going to turn it over. Should I turn it over to somebody? Do you want to speak to it or introduce it? Sure. You ready? Are you ready? Go for it.
I'm ready. Okay. So hi, I'm Mitch Coon, Senior Community Planner, and I'm also here today with Danielle Pope. And we're working on the Master Plan.
Just I forgot somebody. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mark Neal. I'm so sorry. He's sitting at the table with all. He's sitting here with all celebrities. Trying to crash the party.
Purposely being quiet.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Yeah.
Is this want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure, if you wish.
It's an order.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. Mark Neal, I'm the General Manager of Planning and Development Services. Planning, we look after all the long-range planning, which you're going to hear from Ryan today about an update to the official community plan. We also have a development planning team, all the rezoning, subdivision, and land development applications, which then turn into building permits through our building department. That's what I'm responsible for.
Appreciate that. Sorry I missed you.
No, I'm okay with that.
He's kind of a quiet guy. Meanwhile, back at Mitch here, go for it.
All right. Okay. Thanks. So that's good. All right. So today for our agenda, I'm going to start off with the purpose and background, and then I'm going to give a high-level introduction to the preferred concept plan. And then we're going to spend some time on input on key amenities with regards to accessibility. And that's kind of one of our key things today. And then I'm going to finish up with the next steps and the recommendation. So our purpose today is twofold. So once again, present a preferred concept plan from Lake Park from high level. And then more importantly, secondly, is to receive input on accessibility considerations for proposed park amenities, whether they're proposed or existing. So just to give you a little bit of background, we're conducting a 4-stage planning process. We're currently in stage 3, draft master plan. And just to give you a little bit more background on, to go back to, kind of what the purpose of the plan is and where we've been in stage 1. PRC is using the master plan process to guide the long-term approach for the use, enhancement, and management of Mill Lake Park. It's basically a 20-year plan. So we've got, we're accounting for the life of that planning timeframe with this plan. Stage 1, we established a vision, themes, and guiding principles. And then for stage 2, we developed 7 big moves. And also 3 concept plans were developed to achieve these 7 big moves in different ways and to varying degrees. Now, the first option was active, and this was based around providing, sports and activities and kind of moving the park more towards that nature. The second option was a balanced. And so that would be kind of balancing between active and environmental protection. And then the last option was our third, or passive. And this would be focused on protecting nature and opening up landscapes. So for our engagement for stage 2 of the planning process, this took place in the fall of 2023. And we held both online and in-person methods of engagement. And for our online, through Let's Talk Abbotsford, we received over 1,100 surveys that were submitted. And so some really good response to that. And then, for our in-person stakeholder meetings, and then we had a series of open houses where we had over 500 people attend. So we received a lot of input from that stage 2 engagement. So now I'm going to jump into how the preferred concept plan, or what it was shaped by. So we had four key inputs into shaping the preferred concept plan. So one was community feedback. Second was city policy and priorities. Thirdly, we had our fiscal considerations. And then lastly, design expertise. So now I'm going to walk the committee through a series of slides that'll just give you a brief kind of overview of the preferred concept plan. We're not going to really go through a detailed approach for that, only in terms of how it relates to accessibility. So the base map here, this is the preferred concept plan, and the yellow line around is our new or upgraded pathway, our Lake Loop. The second layer here, the blue call-out boxes indicate new amenities or infrastructure. So we're adding quite a few over the 20 years that we're proposing there. And then in the gray call-out boxes, we're looking to relocate some existing amenities and infrastructure. The white, we're looking to retain some existing amenities and infrastructure. And then lastly, we're looking to add green, some open space up on the north end, and also some riparian area, which would be in the northeast corner of the park, kind of near boardwalk area right now. So that's a look at our preferred concept plan. And so now I'm going to jump into some of these specific amenities and how they relate to accessibility. We're hoping to get some input from the committee on this.
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
Is that
yeah,
okay?
yeah.
When you were referencing design expertise earlier, is that like the expertise within this team or?
We have a consulting firm that's helping that. So both. So you have like parks planning expertise, landscape architecture, and then as well on the consulting side. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Within that expertise, is there anyone who's been brought in specifically for universal design or?
If I can through the chair, is there anyone on the team specifically that has a specialization in that?
Not at this time, but that's one of the reasons why we're coming to this committee.
Yeah.
For your feedback. Okay.
Can I also ask, is there any involvement of our Indigenous communities in the area in their input?
If I can through the chair, not specifically, but Indigenous communities can participate if they wanted to. All of our outreach and so forth has been focused on anyone that's interested in participating, unless some of the beginning stakeholder work there wasn't. Okay, so everything is just whoever wants to participate is able to. So yeah, it's open to anyone. Yeah. Thank you. Right. So I'm going to jump into the specific items that we're looking at here. So the first amenity that we're looking at proposing is down in the south west corner of the park, bordered by Bevan and Emerson. And this is a fenced off-leash dog area. And so you can kind of see the graphic to the left there. And just got a picture here of what, if you haven't been to a dog park, just a sample of what this might look like. Now, any key considerations for accessibility that we should be thinking about as staff or the team working on Mill Lake, when you're looking at dog park, anything that we should be considering. So I'm just going to open that up for comments.
So we're going to go through each one of these and you're going to open up one by one. Is that what you're
Okay,
yeah.
Just first off, I know it's probably just a picture of a random dog park, but just from my own experience with my mom, she'd never be able to get in there. I don't know if there's anything that can be done or if it's an expectation, but she would love to take her dog, her small dog, to dog parks. But looking at that, she's in a wheelchair, and as she had a stroke, she'd never be able to open that style of gate. And then her wheelchair, depending on the terrain, it could be very hard when it's muddy, which is a lot of the year. So even if just the initial entry part was paved, that kind of thing can make a huge difference. Just being able to get in, not the expectation to go everywhere because you want natural like terrain throughout, but just looking at the design of the gates, how you get in and out, and then the ability to have a firm ground. Because even with people who might have limited sight or who may have challenges with opening that style of latch, just even being able to get in, challenging.
No, that's great. That's good. So Danielle's also taking some notes here so we can kind of capture all this. So this is great.
Okay, we're going to record all your sharing, so don't worry about that. Yeah.
Just adding on to that, I go to all the dog parks in Abbotsford, and a lot of feedback I consistently get is the seats for seniors. They have to walk through the dog park and then they get jumped on. Yeah. So they'd love some seating right when they first come in where they could sit. And then lighting is a bit of a safety issue. I've heard a lot of women feel very afraid at night, and visually impaired people can't see very well because there is very limited lighting unless the sports teams are playing.
And the current seating in the dog parks doesn't seem to have arms or backs, which can be a bit of a barrier.
I know on that one, it could be a bit touchy because they don't want people sleeping on them. But yeah, for mobility reasons, it's something that I don't know if there's a compromise between the.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, and staff, you hear something you want to comment on, please.
Yeah.
Todd?
Oh, Alex.
Oh,
I'm also wondering, I know some dog parks have opted for the option of having picnic tables. So if that was the choice for the seating, just being mindful of the height, and also if you leave the two ends open, because then wheelchairs could be able to roll right into it. But on the theme of visual challenges, if there was that section where you're going to have pavement per se, you could also invest in some wayfinding with some lights around that not only will help the seniors, but with visual challenges. And then overall, when there's a map for people to find their way to here, like just having consideration of having Braille available, or some kind of texture that will let you know, oh, this is the gate to the dog park, or this is where I am. That would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Counselor. It's just going to two things. One, just provide a level of assurance that we're not expecting everybody here to have a solution, right? We've got folks on our design team and other expertise that will draw as we get into detail. And so the picnic table is a great example. I know there's kind of two different styles. We'll happily engage like the right professionals. The other thing is just another level of reassurance. Some of the newer dog parks in the Metro region have some of the characteristics that we needed to spring forward. So that's just a happy coincidence where people have been to those dog parks, but paved spaces or concrete small plaza areas with seating in there and lighting. So yeah, I'm very encouraged to we're on the right path.
okay.
And just maybe some consideration that the fence, I know it looks nicer when it kind of blends into the landscape, but the people that are visually impaired that would be an obstacle or a hazard. So maybe even just, I don't know, you've seen the elementary schools put up their wooden fish along a fence, or maybe that's where an Indigenous art installment can go. Or just that the gate itself is a different color, maybe a few arrows just saying it's this way, and how much further it is to go. Some people that have mobility concerns know they can't walk another 100 feet. So if they know it's 25 feet more or something, just some ideas of, and yeah, that latch needs to swing in, not out, because you can imagine being in a chair or even with your dog trying to back them up. I'm sure it's obvious.
Good comment. We're recording all of them. We will be able to apply all of them, probably not. We're going to do our best. You know that. Okay.
All right, gonna move to the next one here. So yeah, thank you for the input. That's great.
Yeah.
The next amenity that we're looking at is an existing amenity. So you might be familiar with this one centennial pool just along Emerson. Now with this existing amenity, is there any accessibility considerations? So maybe think of the times that if you've been there or not, what are some of the things that could be done to help increase accessibility with this? So thoughts on that one?
So there is the changing facilities and the accessible bathrooms. So I know architecturally things are built to and they are considered accessible, but a lot of the bathrooms, when you have a power chair, they are not very wide. And when you go into the toilet, you really have to be a master of driving in order to manage to turn or, position your chair the right way. So I would really encourage like the input of mobility users to come and test the space. Like, is there enough room for a power chair to turn? What's the ratio that's needed? Because the existing accessible code that set out by architecture is not actually very functional. And then I know from our families that we have served over the years, having a change table, there are industrial grade made change tables that are adjustable for height. And so you could have someone with MS, use the change table after they go swimming, but you could also have a mom with a baby and use that same change table. And having a consideration for, the lift, like how is it positioned? There's a lot of industrial grade, like I said, of these devices that you could attach to it. Grandview Heights in the city of Surrey, it's a great pool facility, is indoors, but it's a really good example of what is inclusive. You can have family change rooms as well, because that can be a little bit more inclusive, so kids are not stigmatized because their dad went in with them into the female bathroom because it's a little girl. And then when you're organizing those walls in between the change rooms and the bathrooms, being considerate of having sound protecting and sound absorbing materials, because for a lot of neurodiversity affirming traumatic injury people, like traumatic brain injury, some of the acoustics in those spaces are very hard. And they are, for us, it may sound like a creak or something loud, but for a lot of them, it can actually be experienced as an injury. It feels like somebody's cutting your ear or something like that. So yeah, I would love to see that. And I know a lot of our families are always talking about these things for the city of Abbotsford. That would be great.
Good, those are good comments to share. Somebody, okay.
I know personally, I was trying to convince my mom actually to come out to the pool, and she was really apprehensive just because she is a wheelchair user. And I know I could find a few images that showed the accessibility features, but it wasn't enough to convince her to try it. So having those accessibility features really demonstrated on a platform where before they get there, they can see what it's like so they can make that decision, just to encourage them to even try it. Because a lot of the time with barriers, people are really apprehensive about trying new things. But if you can do like, this is our accessibility features and really highlight it, maybe through a video showing, okay, for people with mobility issues, these are the features, and show someone getting in and out, because then at least they can have a better like insight into whether it's something that they can manage, because it's really disheartening. Like, I know last meeting you mentioned your friend who couldn't get into the restaurant, and how heartbreaking it is when you get to that point and then just that realization that it's not going to work. So just having it so that people with different disabilities can see it or read about it or in some way have that comfort that it will work for them in advance.
Take kind of the pressure off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jean?
She was next.
Oh, Lisa, I'm sorry.
I haven't swam there before, but we've talked about the change room, but can they actually get in the pool?
There's a
Is there a
ramp.
lift there, like a,
Right.
how does somebody in a wheelchair actually get into the?
There's no lift. Yeah, for us, when we work with the families, we have to do manual transfers into the pool. And I know maybe you're not able to redo the pool, but one solution to that is kind of how you did the gradual entry at what is the community center that's close to Howe Middle School in Abbotsford? That pool, there's a gradual entry, like that will minimize something like that. And then you can have a water wheelchair available, right? And then you don't have to deal with a lift, because I know that's a worry for safety and when this pool is not being used. But yeah, it is an issue.
Those are helpful. We're recording. Yeah.
I know that, maybe it's been changed, but there's, usually the parking is up high and then you have to go down quite a ramp to get down. Even, is there any way that there could be a few parking spots at the pool side?
That's a good point. I'm a cyclist and I cycle it every all the time. That's a steep little hill.
Yeah.
It's a good point. I don't think we're gonna do it.
It's over by the other shelter too, by the, the southeast, more the southeast side. And I know we've had a lot of community events there with Communitas and MSA, and you have to bring the wheelchairs down that steep pathway to get to that one shelter down there.
Yeah, I mean, there are, if I move through the chair, I mean, maybe Bevan, it's a little further right, obviously, but yeah, you bring up a good point, and something we'll have to, we can think about it for sure.
With the whole design of the park, if there's one area that is more accessible, because there is a huge difference between like manual wheelchairs versus the powered wheelchairs, maybe highlighting that this is a more accessible entrance. Like it might be that it's a little bit further of a stretch, but if there was a parking area that is more flat, or even pointing out on the maps what the grade is, because then they could say, okay, well, they're going to be pushed in a wheelchair. However, it's a flat grade.
Yeah.
It might be further. However,
Someone
you
up that hill in a wheelchair, that's very difficult.
No Lake Road. That's what we're thinking.
yeah, so just highlighting which areas might be more accessible, because there are different areas that are more flat.
Yeah.
And even if you have to come from more of a distance, it might be less
Yeah.
treacherous than trying to hold someone's manual wheelchair as you're going down the hill.
Yeah, that's kind of scary. Actually. Yeah, did you guys? Yeah. Anybody else want to add?
I think that your comment about, describing what you can expect when you get there, there's 6 accessible spots. They're located here. There's this much distance before you get to the pool. Once you get to the pool, like on all the recreational facilities, I don't know how much extra effort it would even take just to have some verbiage about it, but that is a really good idea.
Yeah. Or even on like doing a walking video, just having a staff member, they don't need to be perfect, but just doing that walk. Okay, so this is where we're walking. This is like, if they're stepping up, just calling up, okay, well, there is a bit of a like step up
Or
here,
gravel.
or there's
Yeah.
gravel here, just so they know what they're getting into.
We'll use our committee members to MC it. Think about it.
I'm sure there's lots of people who would volunteer.
I was just gonna say, if we're trying to get community involvement, I bet you if you ran a contest, somebody's like family would be so happy to do that, to be on the website.
Yeah. Get people involved.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on that? We've got quite a few.
Start
things covering here.
Yeah.
Just one thing, this is a really bright pool. It's beautiful. But it would be nice if there was a bit of a shaded area for people if they wanted to get out of the sun for a bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, anything else on that? We're gonna move on to item number 3 here.
Okay, great input. The next one is food services in the park. So down along Bevan there, just off that entrance, we're proposing some food service infrastructure there. And if you look to the right, just an example, we have a food truck program, like a program there right now. And so, if you can think of, what are some key accessibility considerations in relation to food services? If you're just looking at that picture, you know, if you think of your, you know, kind of your experience, you know, what are some of the things that, you know, we should anticipate or could look at doing to improve, you know, moving forward as we build out this plan?
I need a little ladder to get up there to talk to them. They're always so high.
Really quick, first thing that came to mind was I actually visited Mill Lake in the summer when there was a food truck. And all the kids had congregated on the path and I was on a bicycle and I could not. I had to get off and walk my bike around them. And that's fine for me, but someone in a wheelchair, they might not be able to go off the path. And there was just no real setup for where to line up or anything. So they were just all blocking the path and there was no personal awareness that it's a shared space.
On the height service area.
Yeah, that's what I think you were pointing out. And that's hard when it's a food truck, but just maybe even integrating like something where they might drive up, but it might be kind of almost like a loading dock, something like that. Because I know for my mom in a wheelchair, and like you said, for you being a little bit shorter, it can be really challenging. But maybe in the facility offering something where there might be a little bit of an incline up to it.
Mr. Mine, I was just shopping at Superstore the other day. We all are shopping right now. So anyway, I'm a designated shopper at Superstore. The guy ahead of me, he's in a wheelchair. He's got a whole bunch of groceries. So he's not able to even, I had to take all, help him. I was just happy to do it. Take all his groceries out of the cart and pull them up. He could do it himself. I think that reminds me of this a little bit.
Yeah.
If you think people can reach it, they can.
Well, and a lot of the time the point of sale machines are fixed. And then for my mom, I often find like that's more on a retailer perspective. But if you can bring the level of the people up a bit, it really helps because a lot of the time she can't see the pin pad. And so she has to tell me her pin and have me enter it because it's just not accessible.
Or maybe there could be some sort of like, you know, super host, world host, but accessibility host training service that in order to have your food truck, you have to take this training that supports you to be more aware. And then the little sign can go on your truck and you can say,
Yep.
And it's a way to recognize the retailers or the vendors that have actually paid attention to how to serve.
Our agri fair used to be lots of food trucks. I was there last year and it was an elderly gentleman. Actually came out of the food truck and served it back. So that's kind of what a little bit more like that.
Yeah, but I mean, that would be a ripple effect for a usable training for almost anyone that does business in Abbotsford.
I had forgotten about it, but years and years ago, I did a bunch of the World Host trainings and maybe just like offering that to different people who are bringing the food trucks in because I did service across cultures, which was huge. And I did, I didn't love the wording. It was called dealing with customers with disabilities. I hope they've changed it by now. The dealing with part of it's a little rough, but just offering those like to those vendors so that they know, because until you experience it, it's really hard because a lot of the time people will just take things away from people with disabilities and they're trying to be helpful, but it can be, again, something that just leads to a not so great experience. But those programs were
Okay,
great.
good. Everybody keep moving.
Yeah.
No, it's all good.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we move on from this one, I just want to advise the committee that we chose specifically food services, although there's a great image of food trucks. Right?
Okay.
Food services could be a permanent concession building, could be other forms.
Yeah.
So if Danielle, I've been making notes here, and even though you're talking about food trucks, it does go into other directions. Rest assured, we understand the perspective is services.
And sorry, can I just also add, like, for the picnic tables, again, you know, just having different heights, different types of seating, not just the bench that has no back support, like just having a variety of different tables, then that's inclusive, right? And it could address so many different abilities. And then on the line of the food vendors, like maybe it is a requirement that the people can order online, and that can address that issue of paying. And I've seen a lot of food trucks that would just add a table in front of their food truck, and that's where the paying or the handing of the food happens. that
Yeah.
may be a solution too.
Good point. Go for the next item.
Okay, all right, thank you.
By the way, council hasn't, all of these items, council has not included any of this yet. We're still working on the plan.
Yeah.
So your input is very helpful. This is going to eventually come to council for final adoption. And some of the things we're looking at we may not have food trucks possibly, but we need to discuss all the options. That's where you guys get involved.
Yeah, so I mean, we're at a high level policy level right now. When we get into the detailed design, these are the things that we'll consider. But it's helpful to know that at this stage, you know, in advance of that, right? So what you would need to consider. So, yeah.
To potentially save a lot of questions, will Rick Hansen be working with you like they are with the building outdoors? They don't? Oh, okay. That's good to know. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Sure. Yeah, no, it's fine.
There are other organizations that know about
Right, so the next one is our lake loop pathway width. So one of the things here, we're proposing to widen the pathway. So if you walk around the pathway now, it averages between 3 to 4 meters in width. And we're proposing to widen that to 4.5 to 5 meters and add lane markings and signage. And so the question is there any other, you know, accessibility considerations we should be thinking about with the pathway? So open that up.
Okay, let's go first.
Sorry, I know I'm speaking a lot. Two things right off the bat, lighting, and I know that that was on your map, but lighting for the pathways so that people can see where the edging is, and just for people who have limited eyesight or so on. But the other thing is, I know when I visited Mill Lake in the past, there was filming going on, and the filming had actually completely blocked the pathway. And in order to get around, you had to walk onto the grass and go over some really uneven ground to get around them. So maybe just putting kind of a caveat that if they're going to be there filming, that if they're going to take away the pathway, which makes it inaccessible for certain users, maybe that they have to do some kind of alternative for people to get around it. It's not going over uneven ground.
The surface is made of, what is it? It's not all paved, is it?
If I can through the chair, it is an asphalt pavement, and that's
Okay.
what we would continue on with, yeah.
Just also.
Crosswalk pathway.
Yeah.
It's pretty uneven. And I run it and I've come close to 50 feet. Right?
Pavement, when natural things come in, roots break it up and stuff, it can cause a lot of problems. But I love the idea of it actually being marked, because I know I've encountered some very, very rambunctious kids that have just about run me over on a bicycle. So just having designated lanes for stuff can make a big difference.
What do you guys think about riding bicycles on
If there's a designated area, it's a really healthy exercise and it's great, but just making sure that there's a differentiation between the different areas, because seniors will definitely be restricted in how comfortable they are if they feel they're at risk of getting hit by, whether it's a e-bike, whether it's an e-scooter, or just a regular bicycle.
I think Alex.
I think your designers and consultants would share this, but you know, it's always good practice to use large, high contrast text, you know, the lines on the sides that we can see on the picture here, usually yellow and red are the universal colors. So if you have a variety of visual abilities, you should be able to see that. And then the tactile features, because even if I had, you know, a visual challenge, like I could still with my cane feel around, oh, am I on the bike lane or am I on the pedestrian lane, right? Like things like that when you're doing signage would be awesome.
somebody else on that? So we don't currently have designated lanes for cycling. I noticed that. Something scary. Somebody can be running and somebody can ride a bicycle super fast. It feels scary.
Just guide dogs read lines, right?
They
Guide
not
dogs?
only read lines, but they're also trained to, when there's no curb and no lines, to follow the edges.
So it'd be worth it just talking to a guide dog owner, just to ask what, I don't know. But yeah.
Or one of the associations for the blind to see what, because I know that they have abilities to train them for when there isn't, but it's definitely better when it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good comments. Yes,
All right, we're looking, move on to the next one here. All right. So the next one is regards to the boardwalk. So if the boardwalk's retained, so up in the northeast corner, it would require substantial investments would be required. And in the committee's view, what accessible considerations, do we need to consider, and what should come to the forefront, with regards to accessibility of the boardwalk? Yeah.
So when you're entering and leaving, it's too steep on both sides. So it's gotta be more gradual.
Okay.
So especially if you're pushing a manual chair, it's too steep, and then even going down too. You got the grid on there, but
I don't know if it's feasible, but widening it so that wheelchair users who may be slower aren't feeling pressured by people who are either coming at them to get out of the way or people behind them who might be on bicycles and so on, but allowing enough space. And also I know that there's very specific, I reference ADA, but I believe that's American. I don't know what the Canadian.
Accessibility Act, yeah.
Yeah, but there's very specific things for being able to turn around on how wide it should be and like maximum incline and so on. I'm sure the designers are aware of those, but it is in certain areas, the turns and stuff might be hard to navigate.
And I know it's pretty to have bends in it, but that's really, that's very intrusive to, like, that's not very accessible.
Anybody else? This is the walkway is very controversial.
Well, you just have to do the same practice that we just talked about in the other trail, right? So use very high contrasting colors to outline the edges. Even, right here in the picture where you can see that there's the railing and there's a top wooden, surface, like coloring that, like I said, yellow or red, like I think that's really helpful for safety as well. So again, if you're visually challenged, you could still go around in your way, because with the black mat, that's not enough for all the visual abilities. It's hard to see where it ends.
Okay, somebody else? Maybe we haven't heard from somebody else. Go ahead.
Do they have to do either or could they have both and have one that is primarily for wheels and one that is for walking? I don't know if that'd be an option.
Probably sensitive.
Is it?
If I can through the chair, we're considering just retaining the boardwalk. Yeah, there's some substantial costs, so.
Be sad to see it go.
It is pretty.
If there, like, I know it's not ideal, but if there were the boardwalk, but then a more accessible route. That
She was just saying, yeah.
Would be cheaper, I was thinking, because
Yeah.
just stay like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because if they were going to go, like if they were saying scrapping it, well, even if it's not as accessible, is it possible to leave it for some people to use, but focus more on an accessible like route around, or would it have to be removed?
Yeah, so I mean, right now, we've just finished our survey question, but we were basically asking, either do you want to move forward with the boardwalk or the pathway on land?
Yeah.
We would continue the lake loop no matter what,
Mhm.
right? So you're able to continue your way around. But with the boardwalk per se, if it's retained and replaced, to an accessible standard, what are the things that we need there?
Yeah.
Pathway, we covered that the last, kind of thing. So we got your input on that, so.
Yeah.
Bottom line is we know that the current boardwalk is not acceptable. Right? Yes, you're all over it. Either replace this one or there's enough room on the waterfront for us to put a 5 meter.
Eventually,
sidewalk
yeah.
in.
Yeah.
But people love they like the feeling of the boardwalk. There's something aesthetically beautiful about it.
It's, I think, a little bit more interactive with nature as it is now, which is a nice feature. But I guess, yeah, it just depends on whether it's feasible to make it accessible.
Okay.
Is there anything being planned as far as plants being planted to minimize the bugs, as far as the mosquitoes and stuff? Because I know there's different things that can be added into it. Like, I believe catnip is already being used in one area.
I'm not, if I can't the chair, maybe, I don't know if maybe from a operations perspective or anything else. I mean, I know in different
Yeah.
jurisdictions I've worked before in Saskatoon, what they do, but different here. So maybe I'll turn over to Todd here.
Yeah, so thank you through the chair. So we actually had that discussion with a separate advisory committee, because they have an environmental perspective. So we had, I would say, a pretty in-depth discussion around some of the plantings in there, what that would look like. We didn't get into the species level, but knowing water retention and kind of data. So maybe I can just leave that with the committee to have some assurance that that was a discussion point. I'm not. But we have the people on our respective teams.
Perfect.
Develop that kind of detailed design and plan with together.
That's a good question, though. Okay, anything else on that? If not, we'll move on to the next item, please.
Okay, so we touched on this a little bit, but so we're proposing to light the park to extend the time people can spend in it and also to support safety. So is there anything particular with lighting that we should consider from an accessibility point of view? So I'll open it up on that one.
If you look up, I'm trying to recall the exact wording, but for wayfinding, there's that lighting is usually yellow. It's on along the contour of the trails, and it's a light. And there's very different grades of brightness. Personally, from what I've seen in different projects, they are expensive, but they are a really worth investment because it just targets a variety of abilities again. But that would be awesome for the contour of the trails because they'll have the colors, the high, contrast, plus the different lights that you actually need there. And they tend to last very long too, because it's not that you can throw a rock and break them. They are on the ground. So that could be a great asset to this.
Okay, my understanding, I missed that. So you're talking about lighting like on the surface around the sidewalks. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it will, instead of on this picture, how it's a light post, it will be along the contouring lines of the trail.
So track lighting.
Track light, yes, thank you. That's you use it a lot also to define biking trails and things like that. So that's what it would be. Yeah, and it's yellow and black. Yeah.
Okay. Somebody else on lighting or anything at all? Maybe a concern you have or?
Okay, all right, move to the next one. So down in the southeast corner of the park, we're contemplating a temporary event space proposed to hold larger events like festivals, concerts, holiday celebrations. And is there anything we should consider from an accessibility perspective there? So just have an example of an event that, there you can kind of see, is there anything particular from a temporary perspective that we could do there?
I'd say from the Mission Pride Festival, I've seen a lot of feedback about just having shade, like we were talking about at the pool, especially for people in wheelchairs. Consider.
I know in Langley at Douglas Park, the stage wasn't accessible and we were going to present an event and we couldn't get on the stage. So that was a bit of a downfall. Yeah. So whatever stage goes up, just make sure people can get up there.
Because our weather is rainy a lot of the time, just making sure that there is an area near where the stage would be, whether it's permanent or not, making sure there's an area that is a terrain that wheelchair users or people with limited mobility can get to, and making sure that there's a path because crowds can gather and it can be challenging for people in wheelchairs, and especially if they are at a reduced height, they typically can't see anything. So just maybe giving a small padded area that might have shade that has a pathway that they can get.
There's the wheelchair pathway at Harrison Lake, right? That can be removed and put in different places.
Yeah, the
Right,
rollout
it's more
carpet
more
kind of thing.
So it doesn't have to be a permanent thing. You can take it to different places and the city could even put it in their community trailer or something.
Yeah, I know. That's something that the city could potentially look into purchasing. It's a type of kind of carpet that you roll
Yeah,
out
I
and
feel
it's
like it's made of rubber. I don't know.
recycled rubber or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called a beach, an accessible beach mat. Yeah, but for that one, you'll need someone in a specific type of truck, and it's rolled out. But yeah, I actually was thinking about that Langley stage that you were talking about. If the shape of the stage is like that, you could actually do a very gradual
Yes.
grade hill that goes around it. It looks really pretty and
Yeah.
it's accessible to everyone. And again, personally, like I'm biased towards things that we can do proactively and provide universal access rather than having to bring something, because then it kind of puts the light and the stigma on, oh, we are having to bring the mat because those people with their wheelchairs, you know what I mean? So yeah, if it could be a solution that's more universally accessible, that would be great. But yeah, there's lots of ramps that you can see styles, they look pretty, and you wouldn't even know that is actually for accessibility because it looks so pretty around stages and things like that.
Anything else on that?
Okay, great. No, thank you. So this is going to be probably fairly similar then. So on the north side, where the ball diamond currently is, we're looking at proposing a permanent covered stage there. And that would hold mid-sized performance things like buskers, concerts, outdoor theater. And so similar, you know, what type of accessibility considerations could be planned for here? I'm assuming similar, but anything that we kind of missed on the last one that we could point out, or?
Can you just remind us, where is the bathroom? Where is
Yeah,
like a
I was just
drinking
gonna ask.
fountain? Yeah, where would that be compared to the other stage we just saw? And for this one, what's the
Oh,
distance?
okay, the pointer does work. So there is a bathroom kind of in this area right here. So, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, okay, so I'll try. So in this area in here, so just out of the box, the blue box where I'm showing where the area is there, just to the left of that, kind of where it'd be close to the dock. Yeah, no, so that's why I'm trying to explain it. Yeah, I don't.
Art center or the gallery?
No, now we're down kind of behind Seven Oaks.
Yeah.
By the pier.
By the,
Yeah, down there. So there will be a wash in this area. So yeah, yeah. So we'll have a washroom. Sorry?
Is it there currently or a new building?
We're showing on the map that there will be one there. And I think there's one a little further, but we're planning on having a washroom in the area for sure for those type of events.
But again, this has not been approved, but
Yes.
it's a good idea.
Yeah, planning.
Just something that brought to mind. Will the washrooms have, like, I know that's specific to events, but will the washrooms be open all the time, limited times? Do you know?
That at this time, that's more of a, if I can through the chair, we're still at the policy high level, so we haven't really got to that detail about the specific like washroom. We're just trying to, hey, should we have this type of amenity there? That's the kind of the level we're at right now. But yeah, good kind of forward think about it down the road for sure.
I'm just wondering, I know I don't know if this is the actual picture of what you will do, but again, you know, just remembering. So, okay, so the bathrooms where they are, if there is a paved trail from the bathrooms to this medium-sized stage, and then another kind of paved trail to the large stage, right? So that becomes your accessibility area. And then maybe out of that paved trail, that's where that section that will be covered and that is paved, so that if people have power chairs, they're not sinking in the mud or something like that. It's putting everything kind of close to each other, right? So it becomes your accessible hub, if you want to call it, surrounding each of the stages. And I don't know, but I wonder if there's a possibility of adding like a multi-purpose room to each of these sites. Because having worked in Parks and Rec, like I know that if there could be some income making, facilities in that area, that could also help to cover the cost and to continue with the maintenance of these
Yeah.
areas, right?
Because you'll need like a change room or a whatever for entertainers anyways.
Yeah, so you could rent that space, and that could be an ongoing source of income because all of this is gonna need to be maintained, right? So
If I can through the chair, yeah, we're gonna get to a multi-purpose center here in the next slide or two. So, but good segue. So here we are. You either saw the presentation ahead of time or read my mind. So down also in the southeast corner here, we're proposing a single story. So wouldn't need any elevators. Cultural center, multi-purpose building. We're proposing that for council to consider. And what types of accessibility provisions could we plan for with this type of building? So I'll open up for that there.
I would encourage you guys to consult our indigenous peoples for that, because that could also be ceremony space for them too. If you want a reference of an accessible space that is kind of multicultural and ceremony, the Chilliwack UFB campus has a building. It actually looks very similar to what you're presenting here. And it has an example again of a ramp that goes around, but if there isn't wheelchair users, it can be used for seating, and there's just it looks really pretty, but it has very multiple functions. I would suggest to take a look at that as an example of ideas of all the things. Also, where they have lighting, there's like adjustable tables. It's a really good example of accessible spaces for multicultural and ceremony purposes.
Slightly off topic, but still kind of in the same realm. Is there going to be any implementation of any kind of points around the park that might point back to the history that could be used for, like, say, grandparents wanting to take their like grandchildren there, anything that might show like a picture of it before and now, and just different things that people can kind of feel more of a sense of community? Like, is there?
In the history of the lake.
Yeah, just like as it relates, because
Sure, if I can through the chair. Yeah, I mean, one of the things is the trestle bridge, so there'll be something there. So there will be some signage and things like that to be able to, provide some history to the park and whatnot. But that's kind of the next level once again. But
That's not discussed, but I just talked to an older gentleman here the other day, in the park, and he remembers when there was a seaplane base on the lake.
yeah.
Think about that. Think that would be supported today? No.
And like, I remember learning why it was called Mill Lake, because
Yeah.
my wife's mom, she wrote her journals and they're in the Reach Gallery. And we were looking at pictures, and I didn't know about all the cedar oil in the lake from the mill and all that, but there's a ton of history at Mill Lake that's really interesting.
Anything else on this building? Okay, next.
right. Okay, and this is our last amenity here. So we're proposing to reconfigure the Mill Lake Ballpark Diamonds up in the corner of Puritanville and Emerson, and to add some additional parking and food service infrastructure. And, just open up for what accessibility items should we consider with this amenity? So if you're there to access a baseball game, what are some of the things that we should think about?
I mean, obviously accessible seating, because benches are hard for anybody to get up on, but it's good viewing and it's not expensive as other things, but there's gotta be good examples around the lower mainland of more accessible seating there.
For bleachers, you're saying?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
A lot of the
And
time,
covered.
oh yeah, shade. A lot of the time, if they're concrete versus the like more standalone ones, I don't know what they're looking at doing, but a lot of the time, if the entrance is from the top rather than the bottom, wheelchair users can use the very top part of it. So
All right, anything else on that? You're done? Mitch?
Well, I can wrap it up here. All right. So our next steps.
I was just gonna ask, how do you determine how many accessible parking spots when you don't have like a fixed number of seats per se? Do you know what I mean? Like if if you're going into a mall, you know how many, if you're at a restaurant, if you know how many, how will you
occupancy.
determine?
So formula, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, for like open space, like this.
I believe through our, if I went through the chair, through our section 150 of our zoning bylaw gets into the parking regulations there, and it does specify, you know, what you need for accessible parking, you know, spaces for different types of uses. So that's where we would have that.
I just think you go through all this work to make the park accessible, but people can't even go to the park because there's no parking. Like maybe just do one spot more than what the typical is or something.
It's, I don't know if it will be mentioned elsewhere or not, but I just thought about it. Where are the points of like the closest contact for transit users who would be going to the park?
So
It's the big loop.
if I can through the chair, so just off of kind of where up through there.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we're also depending on how our OCP moves forward, there could be some adjustment of some of the transit routes. So there could be some change to that as the park grows.
Yeah, I guess
as the
just
city builds out.
looking into the potential that the pathway from wherever the closest bus drop off point is, making sure that that also kind of falls within the lit paths, the wide paths, making sure, because if they're doing community events and it's ending in the evening, users who would be leaving, making sure it's lit so they can get safely back to a bus or.
Okay, guys, we're gonna wrap things up here.
Yeah, so our next steps, we've actually just finished our engagement through Let's Talk Abbotsford this week. We're gonna be completing the draft master plan, and we're gonna bring that forward to council in the spring. And I'll leave the committee with the recommendation.
Well, this is a recommendation, basically say you've seen the report and you're kind of comfortable with it. And a lot of suggestions you've made, some of them will be implemented, they probably can't all be. Understand that, but we really appreciate it. So if you're comfortable with that and the way that it's progressing here, we'd be open to having a motion. Somebody wants to move something.
Can you read what the motion exactly is?
Okay, it was up there. The motion is that the Accessibility and Equity Advisory Committee, which is us, support stage 3 preferred concept plan. It's generally described in this report, so it's a fairly soft motion. Okay, descriptive. Yeah.
Just from the start of the presentation, I noted that they had 3 different they had the active version, they had kind of more of the environmental, and then they had the balanced. So which of those 3?
So
That this is not, council will have to decide on one of these.
Okay, so that's still kind of
So
up in the
a
air.
lot of this information is more on the, right, so that's the buildings and various things. It is a contentious item when it comes to council, it's gonna be quite a discussion.
Yes.
Sure, if I can do the chart. So basically there was no real winner with those 3 concepts, and people just went to their specific amenities.
Okay.
So we're moving forward based on the amenities that were proposed, and then kind of we'll move forward with the vision and those amenities to present that to council. Yeah.
I just wanted to back up what Alex is saying about having some Indigenous involvement considered in the process. And I just wanted to mention the TRC is making a new call to action committee to start holding the government accountable. So I'm wondering if this would be an opportunity to show that Abbotsford is partnering with that in some way by seeking their involvement in the cultural center. Just a thought.
The point is that the council will ultimately have to consider what we call.
Yeah.
And it's quite contentious. All of these have their advantages and disadvantages. I have a favorite on here. but I'm not sure. Okay. So did I get a mover and seconder?
I'll move.
Moved by Amy. Yes. Any further discussions on the motion? Basically, say you received it, had a chance to look at it, the input's great, and we'll go back to further deliberation. Okay, all in favor? Contrary carried. Thank you, Mitch. Good job explaining that. And we have, this has been a good discussion. Dave. We appreciate it. And the last item here is the official community plan project update. And that's where Ryan comes in. Ryan's been sitting here patiently. He's can hardly wait to present to you guys. So
I love that. Take any chance to get to see the vision for potential vision for Mill Lake Park. It's fantastic.
yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair, for having us, and thank you to the committee. Nice to see you, Gina and Annette. I know you were both at the World Cafe, so nice to see you again. I'm really pleased to be here to provide an update on the Abbotsford 2050 OCP update project. Today, I'd like to share a bit about the stage 2 engagement, the results from that, and the new directions or the new ideas about moving the plan forward in an improved way, and that were informed by that community input. These new directions that I'll be going through this presentation are now guiding more detailed policy development as we work our way through stage 3. But I'll touch on that and as a reminder of the process as we go through the slides. So I'm going to provide a bit of context just to remind the committee what is about the existing official community plans urban structure.
Sorry to interrupt. So I just introduce what the official community plan is. We still have a summary of what it is.
Sure. No problem. Thank you for that suggestion. The official community plan is the city's highest level plan. It's really thinking about the growth that we'll be seeing in the next 20, 25 years and beyond, and how the city plans to grow to accommodate that growth in a thoughtful way, and with the amenities and the services and the commercial and jobs to support that growth. So it's sort of the overarching roadmap for the city, and everything else falls underneath that. That's right, exactly. So I will touch a little bit on the existing plan so that when we start talking about changes, they make more sense. I know not all of you memorized the official community plan, so I think that's a good starting point. I'll then talk about the engagement, what we did in the last round of engagement and what we heard, and then spend some time on the new directions. So it's important to keep in mind that we're planning, as I mentioned, for the next 25 years and a future population of about 250,000 people. When we get to 250,000 people will depend on a lot of things, including migration patterns and in-migration. But the OCP really is looking to build on the successes of the existing plan and look at opportunities to improve the plan. The slide that you're looking at here shows most of the city boundaries in white. The black outline is our urban development boundary. And this is really starting to show that we have a very large planning area within the city, farming area within the city, about 72% of the land base. The OCP is largely focused on the area within the black outline, as this is our area, the council and the plans area for residential intensification. So it's really about growing inwards and upwards, and I'll explain a little bit about how the current plan is looking to do that. So as I mentioned, this is the urban development boundary. You'll see me reference this a number of times, and I'm just going to go through a few slides to provide an overview of the existing OCP urban structure. The OCP aims to focus 75% of new residential growth within mixed-use centers and existing neighborhoods, with the most intensive growth in the urban core, and 25% in new neighborhoods area up near McKee and Augustin. Within this, the city center is envisioned as the heart of the city and the center of public life. It's expected to evolve into the most intensive development area within the city with a diverse mix of uses, including opportunities for high-rise residential and employment. And it is a key destination along the primary transit corridor, which is that line shown in blue going from UFB to Clearbrook. Building on the city center, we have the urban centers. They're secondary to the city center in terms of scale and intensity. And these mixed-use centers are connected by the primary transit corridor, and together with the city center, these urban centers, this is the area envisioned for the most redevelopment and intensity of uses as the city evolves in the long term. So really thinking about that connection between land use and transportation, and specifically transit. While it's somewhat limited today, as the population grows, that demand will grow, and with the transit system will be able to grow with it. Moving out from that core, the plan envisions the surrounding existing neighborhoods as it's currently written for increased gentle infill of smaller lots, single detached dwellings, duplexes, and detached suites. But I will come back to this. There have been some recent legislation changes that have changed the landscape when it comes to single detached areas, but I will touch on that in a few minutes. Further out, we have large areas of existing neighborhoods characterized by single detached dwellings and secondary suites. These areas are supported by neighborhood centers that are secondary to the urban centers in terms of their scale, but they are intended as mixed use with residential and commercial to serve the local daily needs of surrounding neighborhood residents. So trying to provide a non-vehicular option that you can go to. Of course, you can drive to them, but the ability to walk or however ride bikes, however you get there, it's a local serving use. The last area within the urban development boundary is the new neighborhoods area. This is the last part of the city where neighborhoods are being developed from more of a greenfield context, and this is guided by the recently completed McKee neighborhood plan with a much more detailed land use plan for that area. Now that's talked a lot about residential and commercial. Employment is critically important to support the residential growth. So we need to be thinking about our local economy and where those jobs are. We currently have a great ratio of local jobs to local workers, short commutes, quite unique within the region. But we need to, if we want to hang on to that unique status, we need to make sure we're growing the local economy and jobs with the residential population. So what you see here are the mixed use centers with commercial office, but also those purple lands, which are very important employment lands, largely industrial lands and the airport. Now I mentioned some changes legislatively. The province has changed the rules and requirements for our lower density neighborhoods. One significant change relates to Bill 44 passed in 2023. The city is now required to allow up to 4 dwelling units on all lots that were previously restricted to single detached dwellings or duplexes. Council has passed a zoning bylaw update. It was in June they passed that to meet the legislation. It was envisioned really as the first step to meet the legislation, but the OCP is providing an opportunity to think carefully about where we might want to make some changes to increase opportunities in those areas. The legislation is broad reaching. It impacts about 22,000 lots within the city, some of which are actually envisioned for more than just single detached or 4-unit housing. And as I mentioned, the city took that interim step in June, but this OCP update provides a great chance to look at further policy changes with the community and council to consider how the OCP best responds to this new legislation. So one of the big steps we took at the beginning of the project was to take stock of how the OCP is currently progressing. We wanted to understand where we could improve it, but also what we could build from. When we look at that urban core I mentioned earlier with the city center and the urban centers, the plan currently looks to have 60% of new growth happen in that area. When we look at our past applications since 2016, we've actually seen 65% of new residences being approved for this area. So that's a very good news story. Growth is happening in the right places. Existing neighborhoods a little further out, the OCP is looking to see 15% of new growth happening here. It's about 28%. But you'll see that higher number is likely offset by the fact that while we envision 25% in the Northeast new neighborhoods, we've only seen 7% so far. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the McKee plan was just recently completed and there wasn't, other than Augustin and a couple of pockets, there wasn't a lot of opportunity up there quite yet, but now that opportunity is there. Looking at commercial, big objective of the plan was to see a lot of more of that residential, the retail and commercial happening in those mixed use centers to provide more services and shops for local residents. We're shooting for 70%. We're doing quite well at 54% and seeing that the balance of the number of applications is happening in those mixed use centers. So that's also good news. I think this is the most interesting slide of the progress check. When we look at the applications council's been approving between 2016 and 2022, we can see a very high proportion of those are either an apartment or multi-unit type projects. We're seeing much fewer detached dwellings being constructed. Obviously, with the change in legislation, that number is going to get even lower. So that's a real brief snapshot of the existing plan, which I think is a valuable baseline before we start getting into what the changes we may be looking at include. So this planning process, as a reminder, is following the city's typical 4-stage process. We've done the background research. We've been out talking to the community about some early ideas and new directions that the OCP could potentially go, which I'm going to get into in a minute. And we've now moved into the prepare new policy based on those new directions. The new directions report, if there's anything I'm talking about that you want to dig into a little bit deeper, I recommend checking out the new directions report. It's available on the Let's Talk page for the OCP. It gets into everything that I've talked about and more so. Yeah, encourage you to extend that information to your networks, anyone you know who might be interested. And I'll walk through briefly what's in there so you can make a bit of a pitch for us and help us get the word out. The new directions report is really intended to summarize the community input we heard on the early ideas for improving the OCP. And it's an opportunity to link that feedback to the potential changes that are beginning to emerge through the process, through the planning process. The report itself has 5 key sections, and I'll briefly touch on what each of those includes. In the introduction, we know that there are folks that might join the process partway through or need a reminder of what the OCP is. So it takes the time to talk about what is an OCP, why do we need to update it, why should residents care about this, and what the purpose of this new directions report is in getting us to an updated OCP. And importantly, it talks about the relationship between the OCP, legislation, and the city's other plans and strategies. The next chapter is a little more technical. It provides a snapshot of the recent provincial housing legislation changes and the city's federal housing accelerator fund initiatives. We're making progress already on those housing accelerator fund initiatives, but the OCP provides an excellent opportunity to move forward on the remaining in the list. As I said, this chapter is a little more technical, but it's a nice one-stop shop for trying to understand all the complex moving parts that have emerged through the changes to legislation. The third chapter provides an overview of the engagement that we had in stage 2, outlining who and how we engaged, how we raised awareness, what we talked about during engagement, and most importantly, it summarizes what we heard from folks. We had close to 500 attendees at the open house events and over 300 online survey responses. And we were quite pleased with the volume of opinions and the early ideas, as well as the high volume of written input. It's nice to get the answers to the questions of how much do you like these ideas, but it's the written feedback related to the question that really provides those nuggets of information about why people may not like something or why they're very supportive of something. The process held open house pop-up events at several locations across the city. A great turnout at Seven Oaks. We were up at Mountain Elementary, historic downtown, High Street Plaza. We got very lucky with the weather. It was the only sunny day of the few weeks. We were at Sumas First Nation Health Building, and we had a pop-up at the mayor's event, mayor's lunch event at UFE. Annette and Gino will remember we held a World Cafe as well. This was really focused on special interest organizations that are in Abbotsford. Broad range of interests, everything from Fraser Health, School District 34, the various city committees, Chamber of Commerce, just to name a few, and UDI, Urban Development Institute, getting a range of perspectives that often will have a specific lens that they're able to provide feedback through. So again, thank Annette and Gina for joining us on that for that event. Online engagement was a big part of the feedback as well. We did our best to mirror the in-person opportunities and information as best we could. We know online isn't quite the same as in person, but it gave people a chance to read through the materials and take their time to provide input. So all of that to say, the report provides a fairly comprehensive summary of the engagement findings, but overall, as summarized on this slide, we're quite pleased to see support for most of the ideas. 11 of the ideas had over 75% support, with 4 ideas in the 64 to 72% support. Beyond just understanding the level of support for each early idea, those written comments, as I mentioned, provided insights that are valuable for understanding concerns and preparing the new directions that I'll go through in a moment. So we're excited to share the new directions that emerged through stage 2. 3 key themes emerged when preparing the new directions. The first being to refine the big picture of the official community plan. I really talked, the urban structure is one of the big components of that big picture that I walked through at the beginning of the presentation. So some refinements to that, which I will get into. Increasing housing affordability, housing diversity, and housing supply was another key theme. And supporting and guiding growth was the third. Now, within each of those themes, there were a number of key topics and new directions that emerged. I'm gonna briefly go through these. The report has a lot more detail, so if you have if you need some nighttime reading, I recommend checking it out. But if you have any questions as I go through the new directions, please feel free to interrupt me and ask questions. The first new direction is to update the OCP vision to reflect Abbotsford's role as the hub of the Fraser Valley and to elevate the policies that are in the plan related to local economy. Right now, the local economy policies are embedded in the Make Places for People chapter, but given the importance of strong local economy and job growth, it was thought an idea to improve the OCP could be to elevate that as its own policy chapter and provide more emphasis on it. The next new direction is to expand and strengthen climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency policy throughout the OCP. So this would include things like updating the greenhouse gas reduction targets that are in the plan today, raising awareness of how the OCP addresses climate change and resiliency. There's a lot of good stuff in there, but it's not always evident that it's linked to climate change mitigation and adaptation. And looking at ways we might be able to tweak our development permit guidelines to further support climate change mitigation and adaptation. The third new direction is to expand the primary transit corridor, so that blue line I showed you earlier, in consideration of regional transit, employment nodes, and priority growth areas. We know a lot's changed since 2016, and this is an opportunity to think about building on that yellow, what's now a yellow line. It was a blue line in the earlier slides. To think about beyond this primary transit corridor, how could we further support land use and transit coordination? And that's where the emergence of the extension to High Street has come in, recognizing that that's a key connection on the Fraser Valley Express, which connects to the more regional SkyTrain, Langley and SkyTrain line, and also looking at a Clearbrook Road, Marshall Road connection to that main primary transit corridor, recognizing the importance of the hospital as an employment node and a destination, and also the potential of the area south of Mill Lake, which I will talk about in a few minutes. So specific to this primary transit corridor, we have our urban centers that I mentioned earlier. Today, those are limited to 6 stories in height. One of the new direction ideas is to allow density bonusing above 6 stories to recognize its prominence and location to transit, but also provide an opportunity through density bonusing to contribute financially to a housing affordability reserve fund. So again, coordinating with more housing near transit. We're also looking at the areas between centers, such as between historic downtown and city center. These areas, including Clearbrook Road as well, are currently low 1 to 2 story commercial, secondary commercial. A lot of empty lots in some of these areas. But being on the transit corridor and being as a key gateway to the city, there's an opportunity to not only improve the gateway to the city, but also provide more housing along transit and in a compact area that has a lot of local amenities. We're also looking at the neighborhood centers. So it's not just about the core of the city, but we have these mixed use centers throughout the city. The uptake of development and reinvestment in these there's been some, but it's been somewhat limited in others. And we've started to look at why that might be and how we could potentially improve the investment in these to catalyze some additional shop services and residential. So they're currently capped at 4 stories, despite some of the surrounding lands being allowed to go to 6-story apartment. The idea here is to allow an additional 2 stories on these buildings, given that the BC Building Code now has been changed and allows wood frame to that 6 stories, which opens up a quite a marketable and feasible project within Abbotsford, and a good opportunity to add housing in an area that could also have local services and your daily needs just below. We're also looking at our apartment areas, making sure the density is clear and not overly complicating development. And as well as, it seems like a very specific thing, but it relates to local economy. We did hear through engagement that our hotels, we don't have a lot of hotels in the city, but one of the barriers we've heard is our limit of 4 stories for hotels. So again, we're looking at a 6-story permission in some key areas to try and encourage and catalyze that needed element. I'm going quick here, so please feel free to interrupt if you have any questions. The 5th new direction is related to that urban structure we've been kind of building out. It's the area north of the hospital between Mill Lake and the hospital employment node. And this idea looks at exploring land use changes that would establish a new mixed use area between Mill Lake and the hospital. So the thinking here is to look at higher density mixed use commercial and residential development. You can see that the development that's there currently is a lot of single detached, large lot residential with some low-rise apartments and some townhomes. With the changes provincially, we may have looked at this, if the provincial changes hadn't happened, this may be a longer term area to look at, but if we don't address it today, we may lose the opportunity to create something special here and to provide much needed housing in a really key area. Adding 4 units to every one of those lots would have compromised the ability to go back later and do more. So that's what the idea is, to look at this now and really take advantage of its location and create a very unique neighborhood within the city. So this idea looks at low, mid, high rise opportunities for a vibrant public realm and potentially an enhanced street between the park and the hospital. It considers housing that supports health campus workers and residents and the aging population. We know Minnow Home provides a fair amount of care and seniors housing, and we think there's some momentum that can be built off there. And we're working with BC Transit to share our aspirations around the expanded transit corridor and make sure that they're aware of what the aspirations are to support these areas with transit. A little bit higher level, this new direction looks at strengthening our broader OCP policy aimed at improving the supply of diverse and affordable or attainable housing options. So this speaks at quite a high level about cooperative housing and supporting that into the future, below market housing opportunities. We do have an affordable housing strategy that gets into more of the details around affordability, but to echo some of the desires and objectives in the OCP is certainly has merit. Okay, I'm going to jump back to the small scale multi-unit housing. So as I mentioned, all of the areas that are colored on this map did get a zoning update in June of 2024, but we're now looking at ways to refine our existing regulations and where it may be beneficial to go a little bit further than SMU in some strategic areas. But we're really seeing 3 distinct areas emerging. In the yellow, the inner ring or central ring of that sort of goldy orange, and then the dark orange core. I'm going to break those down into their 3 distinct areas. So this area is largely our single detached, larger lots type areas further out. We know we need to permit 4 units, and the thinking here is adding some flexibility for garden suites in the rear yard. Thinking that we did hear loud and clear interest in stratified options. So this would look at potentially duplexes that could be stratified and could include a suite or a garden suite. Ultimately creating flexibility for a range of options to go from 1 unit to 4 units or any combination in between, but in a way that's respecting the local context.
Can I ask a quick question? It might come up, but I know at our engagement meeting, there was some talk about people were concerned about the amount of parking that would be required for more than, just one home, and also the space of the unit, right? Like, and so while you need to allow these kinds of things. Did the city also say anything about that? Like, if you want to do this kind of building, you have to know that at least 3 vehicles must be able to fit on that piece of property and only one can park on the road, or.
Yeah, that's part of what we're working through right now, actually,
Okay.
is this is sticking with the high level idea, but we're getting into the details of how that will work. And when we come out in the spring, we'll be talking about those details, but it's absolutely on our mind is how do we think about the options that are allowed and then how those are adequately parked and given where they are.
Yeah.
Really quick on the same note, I previously lived in Clayton Heights in Surrey, and I don't know how other communities view it, but I think it was a complete failure on the part of parking. And it was one of the primary reasons of moving out of that area. There is literal fighting on the community pages over people parking in front of other people's houses. They say that there's 3 off-site parking spots, but my mid-size SUV, there was not, you couldn't close the garage door with that vehicle in there. And there was no on the property real storage options. So everyone had to use their garages, and it literally would turn into outward hostility amongst the people in the community. And I remember walking at night several blocks because we had to street park and we could not find it. So I think with that, the small scale multi-unit housing, it really is important. And as an accessibility consideration, it can be really challenging because with the parking stalls and the garages getting smaller and smaller and smaller, they're not allowing for people with mobility issues to get in and out. Like, I couldn't climb out of my Civic in the garage because they say there's 3 parking stalls, but they can't actually fit your average car. So I don't know if there's anything that is different between Surrey and Abbotsford as far as the actual space allowed for parking and whether that considers any kind of accessibility needs. But I know it keeps on shrinking.
Yeah, no, great comments. One of the things you'll notice is that we are looking at different levels of intensity as you move closer to the core where there's better transit service, more likelihood of having the option to walk to something.
Yep.
Obviously, we'd love that for the outer areas too, to be more walkable, but that will take time. Yeah, no, I appreciate the comments. As we move into the next ring, so to speak, this is what we are calling the Urban 3 peripheral area. The reason we call it that is it's the Urban 3 infill area that's in the OCP today. This is part of it, and it was always envisioned to start to gently infill and take some of the older, larger lots and add more units to those lots. So it's a little bit different than further out, given that it has long been envisioned for densifying gently. Within this area, being closer to the center, we're proposing that they get the same permissions as the outer area, but with the flexibility to also have detached units that could be in something closer to a 4-unit townhome on the project. What this would allow is for the parking to potentially be on site in around back rather than all across the front. We're trying very hard to maintain as much continuity as we can along the street for street trees and sidewalks. Ultimately, we don't want driveway curb cuts the entire way down the block. Sometimes it's going to be more challenging than others, but opening up this opportunity in this area seems to be a good solution for exploring flexibility. Moving a little bit closer in, and again, this is an existing single detached or traditionally single detached area that you're seeing in the dark orange, but it is within the bounds of the proposed primary transit corridor and close to amenity areas. So again, looking at building on the opportunities as we move closer. So same as the peripheral area, but allowing the option for if a lot is big enough or can be consolidated with its neighbors to consider something more like a townhouse project where it's not limited to 4 units. It can be subject to the zoning of townhouse where we think about off-street parking, visitor parking, amenity spaces, and those types of regulations. Now, Another component of small scale multi-unit housing is we know there are many parcels along major corridors where this is an option, and it's across the province. But those are along the major corridors, they're unique because they don't often have on-street parking. They often have the pedestrian routes, bike routes, transit. They're trying to do a lot, and having driveways all the way along these corridors could really interrupt some of the other functions happening. So the idea here is to think about, are there key segments of these major corridors that we should be thinking about for either apartment, if they're closer to centers, or for townhouse? Shifting gears a little bit, this new direction looks at exploring opportunities for place of worship sites to contribute to the supply of below or non-market housing, recognizing that we have close to 50 places of worship within the city. They've been under long-held ownership. They're often very large sites, and some of them may be ready to redevelop the place of worship. And if doing that and unlocking the ability to put housing above, it could be a really interesting opportunity for the common goals or mission of the church or the place of worship to support the community, but then also providing what's often a difficult type of housing to get, the non-market, because of the land implications and the cost of that. So we're excited to see this new idea be explored.
Seven Oaks Alliance is a big example.
Yeah, it has a little component. We actually have an application in process right now, so we know there's interest in doing this. It's going to involve partnerships in order to make the financial side work.
Is that kind of, I don't know if it was inspired in any part by the one in Langley. There's Shepherd of the Valley Lutheran Church, I believe, built on their property, I don't know if it's apartment or like condos, but I know that those are low income housing that was built directly on their property. So I don't know if it has anything to do with that.
That's a good example. I'll have to, do you mind jotting down the name? What was the name again?
Shepherd of the Valley Lutheran Church.
We've seen a few around, some in Vancouver, but I wasn't aware of that one.
Okay.
It's great to see it too.
Oh, I was just gonna say, United Church of the Poco has one as well. That's
Yeah, so
very similar, collaborative between the church and a nonprofit and housing.
Excellent. Okay, I love it.
Well, the interesting thing is the churches were here a long time ago. They had these gigantic properties. You think about, say, Central Heights Church. Look at the size of that campus. If they were coming here today, they would never have the money to build up that size of church today. And so long, right? That's why it's an attractive option.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, sorry, I'm moving quickly, but I'm happy to unpack any of these further at the end here. We're also looking at policy guidance for considering new institutional uses such as schools, campuses, and places of worship. We know it's similar to jobs, as the population grows, we're going to need more facilities. Of course, we're keeping the school board apprised of the planning process and some of the things being explored. While provision of public schools isn't within our jurisdiction, it's certainly something that's part of the community. So we're looking at helping provide some criteria in the OCP for council decision making. Local economy. This new direction recognizes local economy co-benefits of those mixed use centers and corridors that I talked about in earlier new directions, providing more density and expanded areas near transit. It thinks about the truck parking strategy and commercial vehicle parking along truck routes and how we best accommodate that, recognizing they're important parts of the local economy. But a big part of this is thinking about industrial land being so important to job growth, and we're running out. So the areas in purple are big employment areas, not just industrial, but thinking of it more as employment lands. The OCP or Fish Community Plan currently includes special study area A and B, those yellow areas. They have long, or since 2016, have been a focus of discussion for further exploring additional employment lands. The city reaffirmed those areas through its 2017 industrial land supply study. So we're not proposing through the OCP to change them, but just to affirm those as areas we need to maintain focus for expanding employment areas within the city. Agri-tech has also become part of the opportunity that we see happening in these areas. So you may see reference to that in draft. Parks and open space, another key community element, as you just heard in the previous presentation. The OCP stays quite high level with things such as parks and open space planning. And then you get plans like the one you just saw with Mill Lake, getting into more of the details about how big, what to put in there, what are the needs. Strategies around arenas and pools are more detailed work that the OCP doesn't go down into that level. But we do know the OCP can play an important role in setting some high level direction. And we're going to be exploring ways we can ensure that the new land uses that are being considered also are reflected in the parks policies.
I think, just a sidebar, that a lot of Rotary clubs like to put their name on parks and to collaborate with like a fundraising body like Rotary. I know I'm a part of a Rotary club in Langley because that's where I was working, but we're dying to find somebody that wants us to do a park. Like,
I wish Todd was still here.
yeah.
We're almost through them here, just two more. We also recognize that Abbotsford has many areas that are natural areas, which is part of the magic of the city, steep slopes and some hazard areas. And when we think about development, we need to make sure our tools are working well with regards to working around those features. So a new direction is to look at ways we can refine the tools we do have in our development permit guidelines. Similarly, not just natural environment, but livability. We know that as development comes through, if we're getting more multifamily, we want to make sure those units are livable. So we're looking at various aspects of the way multifamily units and buildings are designed, either through apartments or townhomes, to think about what are some elements or tweaks we can make to start making these more livable spaces, thinking about things such as landscaping and internal drive aisles, active ground floor spaces, where we start to get a better connection between the building and the street, rather than parking out front. So the design is important, devils in the details, so to speak. And this is a great opportunity for us to look at refining some of those measures that are used to guide development. So I've thrown a lot at you, but the next steps for us, this is one of the last slides, the next steps for us is to continue working on the policies and testing the policies based on these new directions that I went through with the committee. We will then take those draft policy changes out to the community to get feedback on the specifics. A lot of people want to know, what can I do on my lot exactly and how many parking stalls, that type of thing. That's what's coming next. Late spring is when we anticipate being out. We'll get that feedback, refine the policies, and ultimately prepare recommendations for council and seek their direction to prepare bylaws. So hope you can get involved when we're back out in the spring, but I'd be happy to unpack any of the topics or answer any questions as best I can. If you don't mind just leaving that one slide up for just 1 second. Sorry. Again, I would encourage you to visit the website yourself, but also anybody in your network that you can help plug into the project would be fantastic. The more people we have helping us forward, the better outcome we'll have. So you can subscribe to the page on the right-hand side. That'll let you know when engagement events are coming or major project milestones have been hit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good job.
Yeah, that was a very good presentation. I have two sort of maybe comments. One is I wish I had this written down. I wish I would have mentioned it when we were talking about the Mill Lake thing, but you triggered my memory when you were talking about the natural forces and the slopes and the hazards. Has anybody sort of tried to forecast what Mill Lake might be like 10 years from now? Like, what was it like 20 years from now? Like, if it's just a stagnant piece of water, like, why would anybody want to go there? Like, are there things that we should be considering in the future about the status of that lake itself and just what the forecast will be? Like, is it going to lose all its water, or what?
Yeah, this would be, for me to attempt to answer that would be way outside my.
No, but it's something I forgot to.
It's a good
water
question.
quality is an issue.
Yeah.
It's struggling a bit.
I saw,
All those leaves, all
The
those
fountain thing is happening.
leaves you see.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing.
No.
Yeah.
I did see that on their map, they did say water, was it cleansing or cleaning? They did have some things called out. They were going to put something in for the water quality. But again, I think it.
Proposal like a water filtration system
Yeah.
using natural plants. They use those in Stanley Park.
Yeah, so,
That's,
but I think that's something that definitely is worth looking into.
Something to think about as well, and it's not directly related to treating the water that's there, but as redevelopment happens around Mill Lake, the standards and requirements for development are much higher than they used to be around runoff and retention and things like that. So as the city changes, I think we're going to see what goes into the lake changing over time too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't want to speak out of turn on any of the water quality.
And my last point is, you know, like, I agree that the way that you just have to densify, right? And centering that in the city center, that's a great idea, but I just feel the loss of the day of, I just like my kids to be able to buy a home and it's just their home and it's got a little, you know, little patch of grass for their dog or the kids or something. And it feels like that's just not going to be happening in Abbotsford. Like where is that? Where's the opportunity for that? So I feel like, you know, maybe it's just the way that it's going to happen everywhere in the cities, right? That's just the reality, but it is just really quite sad that that's now, that opportunity is going to be gone.
I wrote down a few things that I don't know if you're the right person to ask or not. And one thing I wrote down that I actually wasn't even going to ask about is there anything that is meant to support with the decline in detached housing, hobbies that people can enjoy, like gardening, woodworking stuff, automotive stuff? You completely lose that when you're in the dense housing. Is there anything that can be done to, because community gardens are great, but woodworking and automotive stuff, if you don't have the ability to do it at your home, nobody can afford to go pay for a member. Like some people can, but a lot of people can't afford those hobbies if they can't do it on their own property. So I don't know if there's any kind of programs that could be incorporated to try and keep those skills and those hobbies within the community. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, but just expanding, yeah. And I know that certain communities have had different programs where you can drop in and they'll teach you their like repair cafes, that kind of stuff, where they can kind of, without the cost of a membership of going to a maker space or something. But
yeah, excellent point. And as our housing stock and our the types of housing we're seeing built starts to evolve, and I think those questions are going to continue to be asked. Yep, excellent points.
are there plans for any kind of rental housing, like quotas or anything for affordability? Because I know for accessible housing and for affordable housing, a lot of the time there's not a large supply. And in BC, we're struggling so much. And then the people with disabilities typically also might have a reduced income. So in the OCP, is there anything to try and incentivize builders to make accessible and affordable housing?
So we do have higher level policy in our development permit guidelines around looking at opportunities for new development to integrate accessible features and design and access. Regarding affordability, and then there's the building code, of course, and some of the changes coming through building code, which is higher level, or sorry, more detailed than the OCP. Regarding affordability and rental, we have seen a fair number of rental projects being built, and I think a lot of that has to do with financial aspect of longer term hold and the demand that's quite high for rental. But one of our main strategies for affordability on a broad level is increasing supply. And I think you hear that talked about a lot, so that as you increase supply, people do start to move up in the housing ladder or laterally into different opportunities. And that opens up some additional existing housing that might be at a slightly lower rent. And then we look at policies like the church or place of worship policy as well, where there's some co-benefits there. And we're not getting super prescriptive about what non-market exactly means. Thinking about that could be low-income seniors, that could be persons with disabilities. I know the MSA Society, I believe, is part of the Gladwin Church application. Right. So there's some really interesting partnerships that could happen, providing the opening through the OCP.
My one last question was, I know that there's a big focus on the transit, but again, going back to Clayton, they were promising when they built Clayton as a quote unquote walkable community that the SkyTrain was coming. And for 20 years, it didn't. So it really failed in the aspect of timing, that they built this community with very small parking areas. and all that, saying, oh, it's meant to be walkable, it's meant to be a transit community. And then the transit never came. Like it's just now a few years away. But is there anything that says that if we build transit-oriented communities, that we're actually making sure that that transit is there when it's built?
Our transportation division, through their transit master planning, which will follow this OCP update, that will be looking at the transit component with BC Transit, and they work in partnership. Timing is tricky, but I think we're not necessarily putting all of our eggs in the transit basket. We're thinking about walkability, we're thinking of cycling routes, and I know that that's not going to work for everybody.
Yeah.
But we're also talking about where new housing is being located. It's not really dense, but way outside the city.
Yeah.
It's dense, but in the core where you've got transit corridors, but there's also walkable amenities nearby.
Because I know with Clayton Heights, they built it, then they had short community buses that came maybe every 30 minutes. And they were saying, oh, it's a transit community. There's no way you could reliably use that to get to work. And so it just really was challenging. And yeah, they also had very limited hours that those buses even operated. So just hopefully that will be.
Okay, we're just about running out of time here. It's going to get before talk. We've had a long meeting. Very good though. I'm really glad some discussion, a lot of good ideas. We're going to start. Anybody want to share something or come by into the presentation?
I was just wondering, how is it that consideration is given for people to have accessibility to nature and outdoor spaces, for kids to have access to risky play? Because with the densifying, right, that gets lost, and research is showing that that is more a privilege now than an actual reality. And I know that's something that I have loved about Abbotsford, where I live. I have access to trails, to lakes, but I know that's not a reality for everyone. And if we're densifying more, where does that fit in? And also wondering, you know, for the land and the environment, like what are some measurements that are being implemented so that we can mitigate heat, so that, you know, we can have more filtering of our air with all the pollution, right? Like there's a lot of intention that goes into that. And I don't know if you have an answer for that, or is someone else's department, but.
Yeah, you touch on two very important points. I'll touch on the first one. The OCP stays fairly high level, and that's where our Parks, Rec, and Culture, while we do have policies around access to trails and overall networks and park spaces, the details of how those spaces are obtained, what the needs are for different communities, that comes through the more detailed work of our Parks Planning Department. We have master trail plan type work that would help do some of that as well, thinking about how does the trail system work, but that planning is more detailed than we would handle in the OCP. I apologize. The second one.
Trees.
Thank you. Similarly, the OCP references urban forest strategy and some of the high level objectives of that. It doesn't get into the specific targets in the OCP, but it does make that link between our growth plan and the urban forest. And then the urban forest strategy gets into more details around how we actually do that, around planting programs or tree related bylaws and things like that. So it provides that overarching framework, but the details come in the strategies.
It's a good question about trees. Council is really involved in that. We know if you're going to put 4 homes on a lot, most of the trees are going to come out. And that's a tragedy. So we get a lot of big trees in the community. And with densification, many of them coming out. It's a tragedy. So we're doing the best we can. So it's a good question.
Well, and I know in Europe, in some communities, there are regulations as to what kind of vegetation should be surrounding buildings facing certain directions, you know. In New York too, I know it was very intentional, right? Like where the developments are going, but there has to be this much park and forest when there's this much, you know, buildings and what have you. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't hear that much, but maybe like you said, it's in the details and we didn't hear that, but that would be a concern.
If you go along South Fraser Way, you'll notice very few trees except the ones right here at City Hall. And people love these trees and they're gonna stay there a long time.
Just one more comment on that. Access to outdoor space. A lot of multifamily developments through the zoning will have requirements for a common amenity space or outdoor. We have to date mostly focused on common amenity space. So that's one opportunity. I know as we densify those, the competition for space becomes greater. So it's something we have to think about, that balance. But it is part of our zoning today.
Okay, any other comments on passing thoughts, things you want to share?
I just want to thank the city for taking the time and taking, thoughtful consideration of our comments. And we're by no means experts of everything, no, but each of us, I think, have some value to bring. And I know it feels like a slog sometimes to talk about it in the minutia of it. But if you can do it right the first time or be thoughtful about it, it just becomes natural and it becomes easier. Like, and so yeah, thanks for involving us in these conversations.
Great presentation.
Thank you very much for your input and your
Yeah.
comments.
One thing, just with everything going on in the current political state, it's really nice to see Abbotsford continuing, obviously, with these committees and everything with the DEI stuff going on in the United States and the loss of so many of these programs down there. It just becomes more important, I think, up here.
All right, so our next meeting on May 22nd, so put that in your calendar. Hey, maybe I'll even bring snacks back.
Yeah, come on. Jeezies, I'm Canada.
I'm not gonna tell you what they are, it's gonna be a surprise. So, anybody else before we adjourn here?
Did you need
Okay,
to vote?
motion.
Never mind.
Accept the presentations? I don't know.
So next meeting, May 22nd, a motion to adjourn will be in order.
Well, I could.
Second, all in favor, carried. We are adjourned and we'll see you in a few months or so.
Is
Thanks
it
a lot.
same time or not stressed?
Same, 2 o'clock, yeah.
Did you need to have motion the last presentation or?